Hello everyone, and welcome back to Conspiraseed. Today we'll be covering Tier 5 of the Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg, but just the first half. This is Tier 5 Part 1. Tier 5 is a longer tier and has about twice as many entries as Tier 4 did, so we'll be cutting Tier 5 in half and doing 2 videos. As mentioned, this is Part 1 of Tier 5 of the Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg. Thank you for choosing to spend some time with me today, and let's just get into it. The Broadband Killers are responsible for a series of violent attacks that mainly occurred in the Belgian province of Brabant between 1982 and 1985. In total, 28 people were killed and 22 were injured. The actions of the group have made this Belgium's most notorious unsolved crime spree. It's believed that the Brabant Killers are a group of 3 men, each man having a nickname in the media. The first nickname is The Giant. He was a tall man, believed to be the leader. The second one is The Killer, who was the main shooter, and the third being The Old Man, but he's actually just a middle-aged man who happened to be their driver. Even with witnesses, the identities and whereabouts are unknown. On the early morning of January 1st, 1982, they stole automatic weapons, ammunition, and a car. March 13th, 1982, they stole a 10-gauge shotgun from a store, and 2 men were seen running away. On May 10th, 1982, the gang stole a car, and this was one of 2 instances in which the killer was seen without a mask. The killer spoke French, apparently as a first language, and with the inflection of an educated man. The car they stole, however, was dumped almost immediately. Then, they stole a Volkswagen from a car showroom. In 1982, they had 5 instances of crime. In 1983, the gang committed 12 crimes, including robbery and murder of a taxi driver, armed robbery of a supermarket, another armed robbery of a supermarket with hostages killed, robbery and murder at a textile factory, multiple armed robberies of restaurants, and the killing of a couple who owned a small mom-and-pop shop. 1984 was quiet, but they came back in 1985, where they robbed a supermarket and killed 3 people. The gang then drove to another market 15 minutes after they robbed the first store and killed 5 more people. There are still significant resources dedicated to this case. However, the most recent arrests are the newly retired detectives themselves for alleged evidence tampering. The Blackfriars Massacre occurred on June 28, 1978, in the Blackfriars pub of downtown Boston, Massachusetts. 4 criminals who were known to the police and a former Boston TV news anchorman were killed, allegedly over the sale of cocaine. The perpetrators burst into the pub after it closed for the night. Authorities put the time at around 2 a.m. The men were killed in the middle of a backgammon game that had started up after closing. All 5 men were found in the basement in a pool of blood with gunshot wounds to their head. The corpses were discovered by the janitor when he came in for work the next morning. Investigators suspect that they were surprised at around 2 in the morning and were herded into the basement, which was also the manager's office. There, they were shot by 1 or more intruders wielding at least 1 shotgun and a .25 caliber pistol. At the scene, investigators discovered a small arsenal of firearms and small quantities of cocaine and marijuana, as well as $15,000 in cash in an open safe. It was the drugs and cash that led the police to conclude that the motive behind the massacre was not a robbery, but a classic gang-style slaying. The massacre allegedly was over several kilos of cocaine. One of the murder victims was discovered to have been a close associate of a Winter Hill gang member. On June 20th, 1994, Robin and Margaret Bain and 3 of their 4 children were shot to death in Dunedin, New Zealand. The only suspects were David Bain, who was the eldest son and only survivor, and Robin Bain, the father. David was charged with 5 counts of murder, and in May of 1995, he was convicted on each of those 5 counts and sentenced to mandatory life in prison. His case was later taken up by businessman and former rugby player Joe Karam. In 2007, his legal team successfully appealed the case, arguing that Robin shot and killed his family and then killed himself. David was released on bail in 2007, and the retrial in 2009 ended with his acquittal of all charges. Speculation about this case continued long after David was acquitted, as with David being acquitted, the mystery of who actually killed the family was again a mystery. On the morning of the killings, David Bain returned from his morning paper run and found his family. He called emergency services at 7:09 a.m. in a panic, saying, "They're all dead. They're all dead." When the police arrived, they found the 5 members of the family dead, all having suffered gunshot wounds. A message was found typed into the computer that said, "Sorry, you are the only one who deserved to stay." Do you want to hear a real conspiracy? Roughly 50% of all my viewers are not subscribed. That's 50% of people, that's half of the people that watch my videos are not subscribed. Go ahead, hit that subscribe button today. The AMIA bombing occurred on July 18th, 1994 in Buenos Aires, Argentina, and targeted the Argentine Israelite Mutual Association, a Jewish community center. I know what you're thinking. Argentine Israelite Mutual Association, that's AIMA, not AMIA. But in the Argentinian language, the acronym would be AMIA. I just don't know enough about the Argentinian language to pronounce it, so I just put the English pronunciation. This was actually a suicidal attack, and a van filled with bombs was driven into the AMIA building and detonated, killing 85 people and injuring over 300. This still remains the deadliest terrorist attack in Argentinian history. Over the years, the bombings have been marked by accusations of cover-ups. All suspects in the local area were found to not be guilty in September of 2004. In August of 2005, the federal judge who was in charge of the case was impeached and removed from his post on a charge of serious irregularities due to his mishandling of the investigation. On the 25th of October 2006, Argentinian prosecutors formally accused the Iranian government of planning the bombing and the terrorist organization Hezbollah of carrying the bombing out. In 2015, 21 years after the bombing, a 300-page document accused the former Argentine president of covering up Iran's role in the incident. The person who had filed the document was actually murdered hours before he was due to testify against the former president. However, since the document was filed, the case against the former president Kirchner proceeded. In 2021, 6 years after the documents were filed, the case against Kirchner was declared legally null and void. Still to this day, no one has taken credit for this attack, and no arrests have been made. The Monster of Florence is a name given to an unidentified serial killer active in the province of Florence by the Italian media. The killer was active between 1968 and 1985, killing 14 victims, usually young couples secluded in search of intimacy in wooded areas during new moons for maximum darkness. Law enforcement conducted several investigations into the cases over the course of several years. After the murder of the couple in 1982, police leaked false information that one of the victims had regained consciousness before dying in the hospital. Soon after this was leaked, they got an anonymous tip called in to re-look at the murder from 1968, where it was determined that the same gun had been used. In 2017, a freelance journalist conducted an independent investigation that would lead him to find a connection between the Monster of Florence and the Zodiac Killer. So that leads to yet another killer that has links to the Zodiac Killer. The February 9th killer is an unidentified suspected murderer happening right here in Utah. The killer is believed to be responsible for the 2006 murder of Sonia Mejia along with her unborn baby and the 2008 murder of Damiana Castillo. The murders were committed on the same day, February 9th, just 2 years apart. Hence the name, the February 9th Killer. In 2009, the two murders were linked through DNA analysis. The corresponding police departments of Taylorsville and West Valley released a description of the perpetrator as a Hispanic male in his late teens or early 20s. A 20-man task force was then formed to solve the case. In 2012, the case was classified as a cold case. In 2018, the Salt Lake County District Attorney announced that a suspect was in custody in another jurisdiction and was in the process of being extradited back to Utah to face murder charges. In 2022, documents were unsealed and revealed the suspect to be a Mexican national who had previous convictions for fraud in 2008 and was later deported to Mexico until his extradition, which from the latest I can tell has not happened yet, as these are still unsolved. The Jeff Davis 8 refers to a series of unsolved murders in Jefferson Davis Parish, Louisiana. Between 2005 and 2009, the bodies of 8 women were found in swamps and canals in the area. Most of the bodies were found in such a state of decomposition that the cause of death is difficult, if not impossible, to determine. The first victim was found floating in a river by a fisherman on May 20th, 2005. Bodies were then found on a semi-regular basis until the last body was found in 2009 off of Interstate 10. While 2 victims were determined to have their throats slit, the other 6 were too decomposed to find a cause of death. In December 2008, a task force consisting of 14 federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies were formed to solve the killings. The task force was searching for a serial killer. However, recent investigative work exposing connections between victims, suspects, and the police cast doubt on the theory that the Jeff Davis 8 is the work of a serial killer. Family members of the victims, in a twist, actually suspect that the police are responsible for their deaths. Bible John, another cool name in my opinion, is a serial killer believed to have murdered 3 young women between 1968 and 1969 in Glasgow, Scotland. His victims were all young brunette women between the ages of 25 and 32, all of whom had met their murderer at the same dance hall in the city. As this is still unsolved, it is one of the most extensive manhunts in Scottish criminal history. The case would prove to be the first time in Scottish history in which the authorities published a composite drawing of an individual suspected of murder. The killer became known as Bible John due to his having repeatedly quoted from the Bible and condemned any form of adultery while in the company of his victims. More than 100 detectives were assigned full-time to the case, and 50,000 witness statements would be taken in subsequent door-to-door investigations. More than 5,000 potential suspects would be questioned in the first year of the investigation alone. A witness who saw Bible John with her sister the night that she was murdered was brought to over 300 police lineups, where she was adamant that none of the people in the lineups were who she last saw her sister with. And the case has since gone cold. The Tai Nong North and Frankenstein murders refer to the deaths of 6 girls who were taken, murdered, and dumped in remote scrub in the Tai Nong North and Frankston areas southeast of Melbourne, Australia, between May 1980 and October 1981. Because Tai Nong North and Frankston are 2 separate areas, they were initially investigated and treated separately, although the cases were later linked based on case and the similarities of the MO. According to police at the time, All of the victims were on foot, with most of them planning to use public transportation at the time they disappeared. Given the lack of eyewitnesses for anything suspicious, authorities assumed that the victims probably knew or trusted their abductor. Causes of death could not be identified, and most bodies were stripped of their possessions. Around 2,000 interviews were held regarding the case, and later, investigators speculated the possibility of 2 or 3 separate offenders. The prime suspect of this case continued to maintain his innocence and died at the age of 88 in 2020. No one has been charged, and in October of 2017, the police announced 6 separate $1 million rewards for any information that resulted in an arrest for any of the cases. The Redhead Murders is how the media refers to a series of unsolved homicides of redheaded females in the US between October 1978 and 1992. Now, it is possible that I have color blindness, or maybe these pictures aren't very good, but not all of these women look redhead to me. My brother is a redhead, and this is what I am expecting a redhead to look like, at least the color of their hair. The murders are believed to be the work of a serial killer and occurred in the states of Tennessee, Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. The victims were usually women with reddish hair whose bodies were abandoned along major highways in the United States. Officials believe that the women were likely hitchhiking or may have been engaged in sex work. I'm not sure how they think these are related at all, and it seems that the authorities aren't either. Authorities are unsure how many people were responsible for these murders, if they were all performed by the same people or group of people, or even how many victims there may have been total. It's believed that the number of victims could be anywhere from 5 to 14. A possible suspect was pointed out in 1985 when a 37-year-old trucker attacked and attempted to strangle a woman who had reddish hair. He was dismissed in the Redhead Murders case, but was convicted of the woman's kidnapping in 1987. Despite his exclusion from the case, it was announced that DNA from him was matched to a victim in 2016. He died in prison in 2015, a year before the findings. A grand jury decided that he would have been indicted for the slaying had he been alive. However, it's not been specified whether he is a suspect in any of the other murders. And that is part 1 of Tier 5 of the Unsolved Mysteries Iceberg. I hope you guys are enjoying watching the videos as much as I'm enjoying making them. I really do enjoy learning about these and being able to deliver some content to you. I don't know, it's something I enjoy doing, and I hope you guys enjoy watching. Thank you again for choosing to spend some time with me today, and I'll catch you in the next one.